but and also if you're not speaking, if it's possible to put yourselves on mute. Okay, is that all right? Great. So before I get started and introduce our panelists, I'm going to hand it over to one of our corporate, our sponsor for tonight, which is Amy, and she's from Graphy. So Amy, are you happy to share your screen and just introduce yourself and Graphy to the audience?
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Cheryl. I'll just share my screen now.
Stop sharing, I think.
Cool. Can everyone see this deck up on the screen? Okay, perfect.
Yes, you can see it.
Okay, amazing. I will jump in then. Cool. So thank you very much, Cheryl, for the welcome. Thanks everyone for being here tonight and for having Graphy along. We're super excited to be here to get to meet you all, hear from some great panelists, and also to have the opportunity to tell you a bit more about Graphy. So quick intro to me, I'm Amy. I work in our People Ops team at Graphy. So my role is a combination of talent acquisition and basically anything else to do with people. We have Liz here today as part of our DataViz Dream Team, who is one of the panelists. And there are also a few others from Graphy here tonight as well, who have come along to support and meet everyone. So hello on their behalf as well. So I'm well aware that some people might not have heard about Graphy until now, as we've kind of been in stealth mode for a bit. So I thought I would start this intro by filling you all in on who Graphy is and what we're all about. So what are we building at Graphy? We're building the most flexible, easy to use and powerful way for companies to work with data. So you can think of Graphy as the next generation platform for data viz, where you can create and collaborate in real time on modern and interactive dashboards. So our customers can connect all the data from all the sources they already know and love into one place. So that may be Google Sheets, Google Analytics, Stripe, Postgres, to name a few. Invite their teams to come and then collaborate on this data. So essentially what we're trying to do is democratize data and make it accessible to anyone, no matter the technical ability. So I find it quite helpful to use myself as an example here, just because I work in People Ops. I cannot claim to be a technical person at all. So if we think of a hypothetical scenario where I can go into my workspace in Graphy, I can create a dashboard. At the click of a button, I can pull in the data I need from different sources, group it, put a filter, display it in different ways. So a scorecard, a line chart, a table, whatever takes my fancy. I can invite others to come and collaborate on that dashboard with me. Key point, I can understand the data I'm looking at, and then I can use that data to tell a story. So if I can do all of that, then Graphy's done its job. So Graphy's fast, it's powerful, looks beautiful. I'm not biased at all, and it's super easy to collaborate. So we're backed by some of the best investors out there. So to name a few, we've got Seedcamp, La Familia, Elad Gil. One of our claims to fame is Jared Leto from 30 Seconds to Mars as a Graphy investor. Unfortunately, we haven't yet managed to get him in for a fireside chat, but I'll be working on that. So all of these investors see the gap in the market that yes, there might be other data viz products out there, but there's not a single modern tool or product that enables companies to collaborate to this extent on data, regardless of the technical ability. So our investors see Graphy as the next category defining product, changing how everyone can work with data, and giving everyone data superpowers, which coincidentally is our mission. So here are just a few peeps on a mission to give you all data superpowers. So in terms of where we're at our journey, we're still a small startup in our closed beta at the moment. We're focusing on early stage B2B SaaS startups as our first customers and exploring their use cases to find our product market fit. So this point in our journey is all about starting to put ourselves out there more, to establish ourselves. You'll find us more active sharing product screenshots and things on social media. We had a recent exciting update in Twitter. If anyone hasn't seen that yet, check it out. And we're really focusing on customer retention. So part of this phase is exploring what our potential customers want and need to help shape how we can give people data superpowers. And another part is figuring out ourselves. So our brand, our identity, who we are, who we want to be. So it kind of sounds a bit like a coming of age phase for Graphy. And last week we had a brand workshop where everyone had to come up with some keywords to describe Graphy. Super interesting to see some of the responses there, what overlap we had. So some of the words that came up were things like fresh, approachable, delightful, which I think is an awesome starting point for us. And I would also say that's what it feels like to work at Graphy too. It's fresh, we're full of fresh ideas. Everyone here is very approachable. And I would say it's quite delightful to work here. So just a couple of numbers, a little bit about our team. So we're founded in 2019. Time has absolutely flown by since then. We're about to become a team of 24 now, of which 13 of those are engineers operating in 2 squads. And then we have our product and design team, people ops, and we're hiring for our go-to-market team right now. So we'll be inching closer to a team of 30 soon. We are a remote first company. So we were remote first even before COVID. So we're totally used to the setup. I'd say we're great at communicating. We love using a bunch of different tools like Notion, Loom, Pitch, like for this presentation, to stay connected as a team. We're currently spread across 5 countries. So the UK and Europe. In Europe, we have Graphians in Moldova, Latvia, Germany, and a fair few in Poland now. So although we're only hiring from these locations right now, as we scale, we do intend to hire more globally. And in the meantime, we have some people on the team who are originally from a bit further afield, like Canada, Malaysia, New Zealand. That one's me, if you can't tell from the heavy accent. So we do already have a bit of diversity in the team already in terms of the places that we all call home. I just wanted to share a little bit about our culture. So everyone at Graphy cares deeply about what we're building, and we believe our products can bring really meaningful change to the world of data and shape an amazing experience for our customers. We're mission oriented and we're super ambitious, but we also care deeply about the well-being, growth, and development of our people. We have flexible working because we know how important work-life balance is. Everyone's treated like a grown-up. You have the autonomy to manage your own work. You know, if you want to clean a bathroom or do a couple of loads of washing like I do in the middle of the day, that's all good. You do you, and no one is going to judge you for that. Although we are remote first, though, we also do like to meet up in co-working spaces when we can, because otherwise some of us, I think, including myself, might lose the plot if they don't get to see another human face-to-face occasionally. So we try to make sure we have a lot of cross-team interactions, so not just work, but social too. This slide has a few fun facts about us at Graphy. Some of the things we like to get involved in as a team include art therapy, run by Natasha, our amazing illustrator, who I think is on this call. Sometimes we have yoga. We're obsessed with playing code names. Tomorrow we're all buying donuts to celebrate Fat Thursday with some Polish members of our team. So I'm not sure if anyone's come across Fat Thursday before. If you haven't, I highly recommend you Google it and get amongst. It's a national day in Poland, which has its roots in Polish history, but it's basically become an occasion now to just eat as many donuts as you like. So at Graphy, we're all a super supportive team. So naturally, we're all jumping on the bandwagon and joining our Polish teammates tomorrow to consume as many donuts as we possibly can. So following on from that, on a more serious note, like we're really striving to be a more diverse and inclusive team. So we want to recognize and celebrate our differences, donuts and beyond, because these differences are what make our team really great. And we want everyone to feel like they belong at Graphy. So I work in people ops. It's probably no surprise that DE&I is super important to me. And I've been really impressed by this company's willingness to listen to my ideas and suggestions, and then some of the actions that have been taken off the back of these, or suggestions from others in the team. So I thought I'd quickly share a couple of things we're already doing to increase our awareness and our understanding. To start, we have a squad dedicated to DE&I. In the past, we have partnered with Abadesi from Hustle Crew to have an unconscious bias training. We're currently exploring having an external advisor come on board with us to hold us accountable and give us some direction. We had a lunch and learn just today with Jessie, actually, all about the power of data and diversity. I haven't seen her on this call, but I think she was coming along. So Jessie, if you're on this call, hello, and thank you very much for today. We have another lunch and learn coming up soon, actually run by myself and Kasia, one of our engineering managers, which is all about the book, The Culture Map, and how we can apply strategies from that at Graphy. So yeah, clearly we love lunching and learning a lot, and really trying to increase our awareness on this front. Another thing I thought was great recently is one of our male teammates recognizing and calling out some affinity bias that he experienced recently while interviewing someone who he saw himself in. So if that's not a sign that we're becoming more aware as a team, then I don't know what is. So we're holding ourselves accountable here. We're seeing changes, and one of our goals for this year is to meet lots of awesome people from different backgrounds. We are well aware that diverse teams bring better results, and so we're focusing on hiring more diverse talent in 2022 as well. So these are a few members of our awesome team, which you could be a part of. If you have a love of food, even better, we will definitely all get on. So I'll wrap up by saying that we do have some open roles at the moment in our engineering team, so both software engineer and platform engineer roles. If anyone wants to get in touch with me about these afterwards, or just to have a chat, you can email me, amy@graphy.app. Anything dataviz specific, probably better to email our panelist, liz@graphy.app. She knows slightly more about all the tech stack and everything than I do. That's our careers page link, our Twitter handle, if you want to check us out on there. And I'd also say that there's a bunch of us going to be at the Triangles event on the 31st of March. So if anyone here is planning to come along to that event as well, then please feel free to swing by and say hello to our team there. And yeah, that's just a little bit about Graphy. Thanks.
That's great. Thank you so much, Amy. If you wanted to just drop all that contact information in the chat so any people can pick it up from there, that'd be really amazing. Thank you. And I'll be happy to have a donut with you guys tomorrow. Okay, so up next will be to introduce our wonderful panelists. Thank you so much, guys, for taking your time out this evening to just have a chat to us about everything about data, really. So I'm first going to introduce Christine Osazua. Apologies if I've not got that correct. Christine is strategy director for Pollen and founder of Measure of Music. Christine, do you want to just say a quick hello?
Hey everybody, it's nice to be here. I'm not sure if I'm meant to introduce myself more than that, but yep, I run a conference called Measure of Music. It's actually happening this weekend about music and data. And I am an American abroad here in London, working as the strategy director for Pollen, which is a live music and travel company based in the UK, but we do experiences all over the world. Thanks, good to be here.
Thanks, Christine. You have a bit more time to just talk about yourself a bit more and your role exactly in a few minutes. So the next person I'd like to introduce is Liz Curtis. She works for Graphy, and she's a software engineer and a data enthusiast from Graphy.
Hi, thanks for inviting me. Lovely to be here. Yeah, as mentioned, I'm a full stack engineer at Graphy. And focusing mainly on our data viz library. We have two teams at Graphy, Create and Connect. Connect is responsible for our data pipeline all the way from ingestion through to visualization. So that's where I live, and it's a fun time. Nice to meet you all.
Great, thank you, Liz. And lastly is Binta Hussaini, and she's a data scientist at the Times Higher Education. Is that correct? Binta,
yes, you are correct. As she mentioned, my name is Binta Hussaini. I work as a data scientist at Times Higher Education. So I'm not sure if you guys know about Times Higher Education. We do the World University Rankings and other rankings, other university higher education rankings out there. So I've been with Times Higher Education for over 2 years now, and I've had other experiences working with a market research company at StreetBees, and I've worked on several other projects, and I've worked on also been in the data science role for about 5 years now. So yeah, I'll talk more about my experience as a data scientist later, but yeah, that's me. Nice to meet you all.
Thanks, guys. That's great. So we can jump straight into it. So pretty much what we'll do is just have a general panel discussion, and I will just ask you guys some questions, and feel free to ask each other questions, and feel free to just kind of give us a bit more detail about your roles and your experiences, and then we'll have an audience Q&A later on. So I can just start off, and I will throw this question first at Binta, just because you're on my screen first. And if you just kind of give us a brief introduction about yourself and your current role, maybe just give us a bit of, describe a day in the life of a data scientist.
Thank you. So basically, day in the life of a data scientist is really exciting. You go to work not really knowing. Of course, you have projects and deliverables and tasks, but it's so it's so exciting because we work as a team. Most data science roles I've had, we usually work as a team, and each person comes up with a new challenge every day with the data. So majorly, we work with data, real core data. So the data I work with on my current role is higher education data. So we collect data from institutions all over the world globally to do rankings for them. So we do institutional rankings based on agreed or set metrics that we have put together based on different methodologies and different analysis and different criteria. We put these metrics together. So if you have a look at the World University Rankings, we have teaching metrics. So metrics that measure the teaching quality of institutions. We have research metrics that focus on the research quality and all the research indicators of different institutions. And we have student engagement metrics. So metrics where these metrics are actually gotten from student surveys. We get to survey students, get their feel about the institution. And yeah, we have all these metrics, and there's a lot of work that goes into putting the metrics together. So we sit, before a ranking is put together, we actually go through different, so I'm currently working on a project to put a new ranking together. It's going to be focused on Africa, and it's a lot of work just to think of the actual ranking that could apply to different regions based on different criteria, really. So we put this ranking together. There's a lot of statistics, methodologies, machine learning that goes into them. We do a lot of, and because we get a lot of unstructured data a lot as well, I do a lot of natural language processing to be able to draw insights from data. So that it cuts across everything data science. So getting the data, cleaning it up, doing data validation. So really cleaning up the data, I mean, going to getting the data into a way that it's become structured in a way that we could actually draw insights from the data. So this is actually like almost, it takes most of the work, because there's no, if you use poor data to do any form of analysis or anything, it actually will give you poor results. So there's a lot of emphasis and a lot of time spent on actually processing the data and getting to a point where we could actually work with it. There's also a lot of time spent on my day-to-day doing data analysis. So data analysis, that's actually checking the data to see trends, to see, to tell stories, to get information. What's the data saying? What is the data? What statistics? How can we describe the data? And doing this, we depend on a lot of data viz. So there's a lot of data visualization. I also use Tableau. So most of the tools I use and my work on a day-to-day basis is Python. So Python is the core, my core programming tool, is the go-to for most data science roles, from my previous jobs anyway. And then I also use a lot of SQL, so SQL. There's a lot of writing. Most of the data we have is stored in the database. So we actually get the data, process it, store it in the database, and query it using Python, and do a lot of visualization with Python or with Tableau. Those are the tools I use. And then there's point where we get the data to the point where we can create the models. So create models using statistics, using machine learning, using a lot of, this phase has a lot of collaboration with other team members who are either more experienced or have worked on projects like this, similar projects in the past. So a data science role is not really just standalone. There's a lot of collaboration with other team members, which is good because you get to benefit from your managers or so my managers or people who have worked on similar projects, and we all come together to actually decide on the best methodology and the best practices for each of these metrics to be used.
That's great.
Yeah, sorry, I've gone on.
No, we're going to go deeper into it. So talking about tools and stuff and how to get into it and what, other teams you were working with. So I just wanted to bring like Liz in as well. So if you could just kind of tell us like just quickly like a day in the life of a software engineer, but at Graphy.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, sounds good. Okay, so to take it very literally, usually my kids wake me up at 6 in the morning, which is never ideal. But by 8 a.m. I'm mostly awake. As Amy mentioned in her intro to Graphy, one of the main benefits is flexible working, but I try and keep myself on a standard 9 to 5 schedule anyway, just because I find that's what works best for me. Generally, the first thing I'll do when I start work at 9 is check out our Connect Team Slack channel to see if anything's being called out as a matter of urgency. Every Monday, our PM shares a Notion document with some guidance for the week, outlining projects that are currently in development, upcoming projects, bugs that we'd like to squash in the week ahead, and that's always like super useful to start off the week. I usually refer back to that a couple of times in the week as well if I need some focus on what needs to get picked up next. Instead of having a stand-up on Zoom as well, our squad chose to have async stand-ups, which is quite interesting, especially because one of the most common complaints with remote working is that you end up having all of these Zoom meetings, right, and ending up like really, really bloated and having like no focus time to do work whatsoever. So that kind of switching from a sort of live sync stand-up to async stand-up has worked really well for us. So around 10 o'clock every morning, I get pinged by a bot asking me some really, really exciting questions like, how are you today? And what did you do yesterday? And what will you do today? And all the general stand-up stuff, right? And then that gets posted to our team Slack channel. And I'll usually take the time to read through everyone else's responses there as well. But you guys are probably interested in the actual data viz work stuff and not the general software engineering processes. So to continue, as mentioned, the focus of my work at Graphy is data viz. So the majority of the time I'll be working on a viz project. In the past, this has included things like building our components out for bar charts and line charts and integrating them into the app, adding interactive tooltips to charts, building scorecard components and inline metrics, which are essentially dynamic statistics drawn from your data that you can visualize in the middle of a rich text block, and they will update as your data updates. That was quite a fun project to work on. And going forward, work could encompass things like adding support for goal lines, trend lines, adding new chart types like scatter plots and so on. And I think I'll go into details about tech stack and so on in a little bit. But what I do on a day-to-day basis also depends on what stage my current project is at. So if we're in the early stages, or like what we would call the shaping phase, I might be spending time doing research into different ways we could solve a problem, bouncing ideas around with other teammates, or writing up proposals based on that research. And one thing noting here is that especially in the realm of data viz, we have a really, really strong collaboration between engineering, design and product, which means that I'm usually involved not only in like architecting the code and making those technical decisions, but I'm also involved in discussions surrounding product questions, like, for example, how can we help our users reach insights faster? And as this like cross collaborative team, we usually have these kind of, sketching sessions to try and get us to a solution. And yeah, that's really cool. When the project's in the building phase, it's a pretty standard approach, breaking down into tasks in Jira. Some tickets I'll grab and do on my own. I'm also a really big fan of pair programming though, especially when it comes to working on tasks that are somewhat complex, because 2 brains are infinitely better than 1 brain. So all in all, my day is usually balanced between planning meetings, pairing, solo work, reviewing PRs. Sometimes I've got the opportunity to be involved in customer calls and user testing, which is also really awesome because it's like really, really builds the hype when you can see how people are using your product. And as Amy mentioned, we also create activities like coffee chats, lunch and learns, and the Graphy quiz, which help to break up the week a little bit and also give us a little bit of bonding time as a team, which is super nice.
Great, thanks, Liz. And Christy, could you tell us a bit about a day in the life of your role?
Yeah, of course. Hi, everybody. So yeah, I am no longer in a fully data role. My background is in my MBA is in marketing, my undergrad degree is in music business, and then my master's in data science. So what I've done in my current role is kind of combining all of those things together. So like I mentioned, I work for a live music and travel company called Pollen, and I'm the strategy director there. And so what my day looks like is kind of a mix between strategic work and still using data to incorporate data into my everyday work. So a kind of typical day for me involves lots of meetings, like other people have mentioned. But in addition to that, what I am doing is doing things like building out risk models and frameworks, doing assessments for our prioritization of artists we want to work with. So what that might look like is the other day, I built a regression model to determine how much revenue we should expect from artists based on various metrics that are associated with the artists, such as social media engagement rates, the number of social following, the number of streams they're getting on Spotify right now, the size of previous shows they put on, et cetera, and pulling all that data together to build out a regression model to then help us make decisions as to what artists we should work with. From there, I take that quantitative stuff and then match up with qualitative information. For example, things like how difficult is an artist to work with and how difficult is a team been historically to work with. Is there any scandals that the artist has had recently that might be weary of as a company to want to work with them? Things like that are all important for us to kind of think through and think about. And so I incorporate the qualitative and the quantitative together in order to kind of come together to make a risk framework, for example. So my day-to-day basically takes data and then applies it practically for us to make business decisions from a strategic level. So from all the way down to individual experiences we might be putting on. So for example, coming up, we have an experience with WizKid, and it's an Afrobeats kind of experience in Ibiza. So I might be doing work to figure out, whether or not we're going to break even for that event. So that's more of like kind of financial data that I'm looking at. But other times I might be kind of assessing, hey, how risky is this upcoming experience? Is this an experience that we're going to potentially lose money on? Or is this an experience that we're not going to satisfy our customers? And if we, and what ways we need to work towards, improving that kind of experience. Yeah, that's me. You're on mute, I think.
Sorry, I'm just talking away. That sounded really interesting. I know Binta mentioned SQL and Python. So what kind of tools or technologies do you guys use in your roles? I mean, it'd be great. I'm sure that everybody would like to know what kind of technologies really that you guys use on a day-to-day as well. Christine, do you want to?
Sure. So in previous roles, and now in this role as well, I use SQL, quite often SQL. I use it much more frequently. In my previous roles, I was on the data and insights teams of companies, so I use SQL probably every day. I'm not using it quite as much anymore, but that's still a core skill that's really useful for me because being able to pull your own data is really helpful. Some analysts are able to get data sourced to them by other teams, but if you're able to do it yourself, it usually helps a lot with speeding up your day. I still use Python on a pretty regular basis. I learned R in my master's program, but don't use it very frequently. I ended up learning Python in a boot camp, and I find it to be a much more useful tool overall. And so I use that to do build out models and things along those lines. In terms of other like practical tools that I'm using, I use Excel every single day and probably will for the rest of my life. So do not skip on learning your Excel skills just because you're working as a data analyst or a data scientist, because it's just as important as the other more technical skills.
I'm an Excel geek. I love it. So trying to transfer to something else is very hard for me. What about yourself, Amy? Is it very much similar, or with the visualization aspect of it? Is there a particular tool you use, or I guess?
I might leave that one for Liz, actually.
Sorry.
I was like, should I try and fumble my way through this and pretend I know? No, over to Liz.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So obviously at Graphy, we're building data visualizations for the web. So the most popular technology you might be expected to know if you're building data viz for the web is D3, which is a JavaScript library for data viz. It's like pretty ubiquitous. Like the first version of it was released 11 years ago. So it's a proper tried and tested staple. And there are a lot of frameworks out there for building charts, but the majority of them are built on top of D3. So it's definitely a skill that you'd want to know. And of course, if you're building anything at all for the web, you'll need a strong understanding of like the underpinnings of that HTML, CSS, JavaScript. At Graphy, we use TypeScript throughout the app. Our front-end components are written with React, and server-side we use Node. In my role, like while I am data viz focused, I'm also working across the stack. So I'm thinking not only about our front-end library, but also about how we'll prepare the data for charts in the back end. When we're light on viz specific work, I do also work on aspects that aren't directly related to the chart components. So like our data editor, which is the area where the user configures their chart. And now and then I chip in with our work surrounding integrations, for example, like the processing of Google Sheets data. And I will also throw my hat in the ring for SQL as well, since we use it for all our database stuff. So no matter what you're doing, SQL is a winner. Yeah. If you're interested to learn more about the stack we use at Graphy as well, I can drop a link in the chat to our Stack Share page.
Oh, that'll be great. Thanks. Binta, I know you were talking about Python and SQL before. Is there any other tools and any skills that you think that are imperative for your role?
Yeah, for my role, there's a lot of other database tools, and like Christine mentioned, there's a lot of Excel. There's a lot of Excel work as well. You can't run away from that with data. And then there's a lot of, so I use Tableau. I really like Tableau. It's something I learned by myself. I went for like a 1-2 hour event about Tableau, and yeah, I just picked interest in it over the years, and it's really, really a go-to for me to just visualize the data immediately, just import the data, visualize it, and see what to make out of it. So it's one of the tools I use for my analysis stage, exploratory data analysis phase. So apart from that, most of my day-to-day is Python and SQL, really. Yeah, that's me.
That's great. Thanks. So you mentioned you had like you did a day course on Tableau. So I think it kind of leads well into the next question, is just like, what are the routes that you all took to get to your current position? I know, Christine, you mentioned your MBA in data science and stuff, but so your master's in data science but is there any kind of, are there different routes that people can take, especially for maybe some career changers or people who have another degree or don't have a degree? What would you say is the best route to get into your positions?
Yeah, I can take that to start. So like I mentioned, I have a bunch of degrees. I don't think you need any of them to do what I do, so I don't take that as like that's the route you need to take. I learned Python in a 12-week boot camp. It was amazing. It helped that I already knew how to code in other languages. So like I think Liz was talking about HTML and CSS. In JavaScript, I was already familiar with those spaces, so learning an additional language on top of that was actually fairly easy and straightforward, which was really quite helpful. So if you come with a background, even if you're in a background like web development, something like that, I think it's really easy to transition to learn new languages. So I guess that's one component of it. And then I think one thing that's always helpful, it's not necessary, but really helpful if you want to work in the data space, is become a subject matter expert in what you want to work in specifically. I've always studied and always been interested in music, so I've always been looking at and been interested in music data. So it really helped me when I was going into various roles to come with that level of expertise and knowledge and understanding within that space, which had nothing to do with the technology aspect of it. And then adding that additional layer of, and I can also do the tech part of it as well. So I think that's a really easy path forward if you're trying to do a career change. Let's say you're already in a finance role, but not in a technical role. If you do enjoy finance, if you don't, that is what it is. But if you do enjoy finance, adding that additional layer of understanding financial data, not just maybe finance, or if you're a lawyer, understanding legal data, et cetera, and building that together, I think is a really good way to kind of do that career pivot. And if you happen to not like what you're doing, it also might help you at least get that experience within the more technical side of things, and then move to a space that you're more interested in potentially.
Yeah, that's great. Binta, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, for me, I had a degree in computer science, and then I came to do a master's in data science or big data. And then I would say most of my master's was based, we did a lot of practicals, but then there was a lot of theory as well. There's a lot of maths and a lot of theory and a lot of, going into the core behind the whole data science, which is built on maths and statistics. But then work experience has been one of the biggest training schools, or it's been the biggest for me, just learning on the job. And I would say, if you were coming from, during my master's, I met people from all sorts of backgrounds, finance, some even, well, most of them either finance or something like engineering or something already techable. I would say, if you have the interest, one thing I knew about myself, I used to work, I haven't always done data. I worked in telecommunications as a systems engineer for 5 years, but I was more interested in the data aspect of my job because I used to do a lot of work with CDR, so call records. And I was more interested in just, taking that data. It was always in Excel, trying to analyze it to be able to find the solution to the problems I experienced on my job. So I would say, if you already have an interest in data, then you can build on it by yourself first. I started building on it by myself, actually. I started doing all sorts of courses and certifications. I started looking out there for courses that you could do. Some of them are even free. There are lots of free platforms to do courses. And I started to see where my interest was. Like I figured out that I would be able to do a lot with data because I had the interest in me. And I also point out something Christine said about, if you focus on the area that you have knowledge on, because there's a lot of the work you do in data depends on the domain knowledge. So you just don't, it's not just all about the technical aspect, not just all about coding. There's a lot of there's a lot of need for you to be able to understand what you're doing, because you'll come to a point where you have to be able to use that information, technical information, to be able to present some insight. So you would need the domain knowledge. So I would say, first of all, identify your interest in data. Do you really have an interest, or is it just because of all the fuss and all the publicity about data science and data? If you do have an interest, it doesn't really matter where exactly you are at. You could start learning by yourself, and while you're learning, you'll see you'll be exposed to a lot of courses online, or a lot of, like the data camp Christine mentioned, you've been exposed to a lot of areas where you could actually go to get more information. So it's enough for a master's for you. And if you're not, you're not just all about masters, or you're not in that career path of the degree and masters, then you also find a lot of information online about how you can actually, make yourself better. And I would say, once you're at that point where you think you can actually do something, try to get a job, even if it's like, my first job wasn't a paid job. It was an internship where I wasn't even paid, but I was able to develop the work experience in that job. And that was what helped me to be able to secure other jobs in the future. So yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's some great advice. Thank you. Liz, is there anything you might want to add?
Yeah, so I guess I probably had a bit of an unconventional route into engineering in general, because I don't have a computer science degree and I don't even have a STEM degree. I've just always been really, really excited about problem solving and programming, and programmed as a hobby for a really long time before entering the industry. So I was always quite passionate about data viz, and the way I landed my first engineering role was actually through a data viz hobby project that I was working on. So I had a spreadsheet full of historical census data for people that lived in Dundee in the late 19th and early 20th century. And I used this data to build an interactive map with Leaflet.js, where you could click on each street in Dundee and see the inhabitants at each address with their ages and occupations across the years. And that was a super fun project that combined a couple of my interests, which was, history and data visualization, and something that I'm really passionate about, and why I chose to go in this direction with that data viz for the web is because I love this idea of making these kind of interactive visualizations where people can explore. And yeah, so in the process there, I was able to combine a few of my interests, history, data viz, and I got some recognition for that, and got my first engineering job. So my advice there is definitely, yeah, just pick things that you're interested in. If you're going to learn data viz, there are loads of free data sets that you can find online, like government websites, for example, are really good for like publishing their data. Pick something that interests you and try to visualize it. Don't try and force yourself into like learning with boring materials. Like pick something you're passionate about, something that you want to explore or find insights on, and see what you can make. So that's my thoughts there. And yeah, then my first engineering job actually wasn't viz related, but it was involving building an image to CSV data processing pipeline. So while there was no viz involved, we were working with like a lot of big data there. I even had some like natural language processing to extract entities from chunks of text. So that was pretty interesting. And then after that, I moved to Graphy and just got stuck in with the viz there, and here I am today.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. That kind of leads on to my next question, is just like the is there a standard progression route? So like once you get your first job in, like you said, just data visualization or something, is it standard, like you go to a software engineer role? It's just, is there a standard progression route or anything like that, would you say?
I think for my role specifically, like I'm not specifically a data viz engineer. I'm still like just like a full stack engineer that's happened to specialize in data viz. So my answer to that question is that, yeah, for my role, the career progression is pretty much what you would expect from a standard software engineering position. But specializing towards data viz has definitely been something that's been more like self-driven, because I was passionate about it. And I spoke with my manager, even back when I was new to Graphy, I was like, yeah, I'm really keen to get involved with data viz. Can I get involved with that area of the app specifically, because that's what I'm interested in, and that panned out well. So yeah, definitely, obviously, that software engineering is a kind of broad spectrum. And at Graphy, like, we're lucky enough to have a really great culture where our engineers are encouraged to and enabled to work in areas that interest them where possible. So like, yeah, my advice there would be like to just always advocate for your own interests. If you have got a vision of where you like to be or something you'd like to specialize in, don't ever hesitate to raise that with your manager and see where you can go, because your role might be more flexible than you think it is. And yeah, like as before mentioned, even if you're not working in tech, if you're working in an industry and there's stuff there you want to visualize, go for it if you're interested in it. Follow those passions.
It's great, follow your passion. Christine, is there anything you might want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about working in a data space is it's not, at this point, it's not a new industry, but it's not a particularly old one. So it's not like there's a clear pathway, like, being like a doctor or a lawyer where you're like, cool, I do this, 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 and this, and then I am a doctor. There's no time in which you can say you're a data scientist, a data engineer, et cetera. There's no credential or anything like that. So like the career progression can look all kinds of ways. Like my career progression, I started in a web development role. Actually, my first job out of school was more like a project manager role. Then I moved into a web developer and social media role. It was a combination, was on a marketing team. From there, I went and I was a data analyst. And then I was a data and insights director. And now I'm on a strategy team. So there was no like clear progression in any kind of way. It just kind of depends on what opportunities kind of come to you. But really, I think it's more about using data can help you get really far within various roles and industries and verticals you want to work in, because not everyone is willing to step up and do the technical part of whatever job that might exist. That gives you the upper hand for whatever what you're interested in or whatever you're really applying to.
Yeah, I get that. That's great. So I just wanted to encourage people to, if you don't want to speak later on, feel free to start putting some questions in the chat, and then we can ask the panelists, or you can put your hand up a later date and you can jump off mute and ask the questions directly. Just a few more questions. Are there any kind of current trends you see in the data space or in the data world. You can tell I'm not very techie, so excuse me if I'm not using the, the right language, but is there any kind of exciting new trends you would say in the data world? Binta?
Because like tech data science or data analyst has been here for a while. It just keeps being remodified in different ways. So yeah, there are always new stuff coming up, new models, new ways of doing things. Like I think that's like one of the main core of every team, every good team, trying to find out, what's the new way to do things. For me, I think one of the new things that we're starting to really do as a team is trying to focus on trying to go away from just using structured data. So trying to do more of getting people to be able to, like, especially with our surveys, to be able to express their opinions in open text. So instead of doing surveys where it's just quantitative, we're trying to do more qualitative surveys to be able to get people to express, their feelings more, because I think with that, we've noticed that we're able to actually draw more insight. So it's not just, putting like a structure to the data and just taking what we feed them, because we actually tell them, oh, what options, with among these options, which one will you choose? But we actually give them an opportunity to express their opinions. And through that, we're able to actually draw more insight. So that's one of the areas that we're trying to focus on. So there's a whole lot of focus on natural language processing now for us as a team, for me and as a team, and also for my personal development. I'm trying to do more with that. But it's been here for a while now, so it's not like a new trend or anything, but it's just in my current role, this is something I'm trying to do more of, and instead of focusing on qualitative data. And also we're trying to do more of focusing on developing the already existing algorithms. So trying to put things together, trying to, see what works best, trying to do more of. Hello. So there's a lot of work trying to, focus on not just the what's in the market, but trying to do more research on what can be done. So yeah, there's a lot of work that has already been done in the data science space, but there's a lot of research that can also be done on what's being done. So we're trying to pull away from just using already existing models, and because these models were actually developed by people, by human beings, and based on, so we're trying to do more of pushing ourselves to do more research into what best approaches and best methodologies and best models to develop for every single case we have. So yeah, I think it's learning continues actually in the data science. It never really just stops. There's always another thing to learn, something new to learn. So yeah, that's what I would say to this question.
Christine or Liz, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think one area that I'm really excited about is how people are using data in interesting ways to discuss diversity and inclusion. So for example, within the music space, a company I really admire called Chartmetric has built out a database that shows the pronouns of artists and then compares that to how they're doing in charts, playlists on Spotify, things like that. And they created that database by parsing through artist-made biographies. The little bios you see, they're pulling out the pronouns that are used to talk about the artist within those, since there's no input of artist gender any other way, for example. I think that's a really clever example of how you can use data to then inform information about what representation actually looks like. And I'm really excited to kind of see more things kind of happening in that space as the use of data becomes more ubiquitous and the access to be able to do projects like this becomes easier.
No, that is interesting. I like that idea. Liz, is there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I think one thing that I'm really interested in is like collaborative tools going forward. So I know if you guys have heard of Observable, it's a website where if you work with Python, if you know like Jupyter Notebooks, Observable is kind of like Jupyter Notebooks except for JavaScript and data viz. So that's like super exciting. You essentially have these cells where you can like type code, run code, and see it like running, see the chart visualized like live in your browser. And it's really great for like playing around with Viz, like just like, you know, playing around with settings, tweaking things, like seeing how it affects stuff. It's pretty cool. And recently, I think at the end of last year, they released their collaboration. So you can now collaborate in real time on data viz with people, which is super interesting. And I think especially now that we're moving towards a remote world, really, or at least we've got like a big uptick in companies working remotely since COVID happened. I think collaboration is going to become like more and more important. So obviously Observable is like their collaboration is aimed at sort of like data engineers collaborating together. But that's also a problem that we're aiming to solve at Graphy. Like we're not obviously we're not pitching ourselves at engineers, but like we are pitching ourselves towards teams who want to be able to visualize their data easily and then, you know, comment on that data, come to an understanding of that data together, and analyze those insights without the need to write a single line of code. So I think, to be honest, I think it's a pretty big challenge, but that's what makes it fun to work on.
Okay, thank you. That's great. I'm going to open the floor to some questions. So Kemi had already put a question in, so I will just ask that. So she's asked, or he or she has asked, data analysis versus data science. What is the difference? Does anyone want to answer that?
I can take that.
Yeah.
So first of all, just because of the way data roles work is sometimes there is not a difference. So I will caveat it by that. So make sure you read the job description and ask a lot of questions when it goes to roles, because sometimes people will hire analysts thinking they're data scientists, et cetera, especially if you're working at a not tech company. A lot of not tech companies will catch all data science as terms for wildly different things. That caveat out of the way, generally data analysts are, sometimes they're extracting the data themselves, sometimes they are not, but they're usually looking at data and much more mirror what you might consider, for example, someone in business intelligence, where they're looking at data and trying to help make decisions from that data. They might be building models, they might not be, they're probably not doing anything regarding machine learning, for example. They might be in Python, they could just be in Excel, for example. There is a wide swath of what an analyst role can look like. For the most part, when it comes to data science, they are usually basically doing science, meaning they're developing hypotheses. They're then trying to, you know, prove or disprove their hypothesis. They're putting together algorithms. They are they're building out sometimes things that are like repeatable, so things that can be automated, for example, or they're working with the data engineering team to then execute on something that can be automated. And that's the caveat that data engineering is wildly different from either of these roles. And if you're ever in a company where they expect you to be an analyst, a data scientist, and an engineer, you should probably just run. But if you can do all three of those things, more power to you. Yeah.
Sorry, that was me. Does anybody else want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I totally agree with Christine. Just to add one point, that in my role as a data scientist, it's basically end-to-end, so lots of data analysis. So most of the roles, the data science and data analysis, well, I would say most of data science roles, that's the one I'm really aware of, have a lot of data analysis as well. But then I would say that the data analyst role can exist on its own, like it can do without data science, or without all the science behind it, without all the machine learning, without all the, it can just focus on actually drawing insights from the data. It's really very interesting. It's one of the very interesting aspects, because you go into the data, you find the information, and you use that information to build those hypotheses, models, or whatever you need for your data science. So yeah, it's the core, it's also a core part of data science. So they don't really exist totally, they come together in a lot of ways. So yeah, that's what I wanted to add.
Okay, thank you. Liz, is there anything else?
No, it's not in my wheelhouse, so all good.
That's fine. Any other questions? Feel free to put your hands up, and then I can select you. Okay. Someone has asked, does anyone use Google Analytics?
I've used Google
I
Analytics
think Liz
before.
H has asked, does anyone use Google Analytics?
Yeah, so I've used it before. Like I mentioned, I was a web developer in a past life, so that is actually how I got my interest in data. Essentially, I had never heard the word analytics before Google Analytics. So this would have been, oh gosh, 10 plus years ago, probably at this point. And that's kind of how I got my interest in that space. For the most part, you're probably only going to be using Google Analytics if you are a web analyst or a marketing analyst or something along those lines, which are really kind of like sometimes subsets of being a data analyst, but sometimes that might be, again, wildly different roles. But essentially, what Google Analytics shows is like web traffic, and then you can really get really granular with how you use the data that comes from that platform to assess, like, customer churn, the funnel the journey that customers are going on, et cetera, and then kind of figure out doing things like A/B testing is a component of marketing analytics that you might be doing, and that's all really doable within Google Analytics, basically.
Does anyone else want to add anything? Have you, Binta or Liz? Do you use Google Analytics?
Yeah, just majorly for nothing to, I don't use it in my core. I used to use it in my previous role to do like visualizations and to do like random, but yeah, it's very easy to learn, to be honest. I mean, the part I was using, I didn't use all of it, but I think it's something that is very straightforward and easy to learn if you really want to.
So actually, I have a question directed at you, Binta. Ifra's asked, can you please explain how you analyze qualitative data?
Okay, so basically, qualitative data is unstructured data, so text data where people get to, like I said, express their opinions. And this unstructured means data can be really messy. So first off, I do a lot of cleaning on the data. So cleaning can be checking spellings, correcting spellings, translating it, because some of this data comes back in different languages. So there are different packages in Python that allow you to actually translate data that is in other languages. So getting the data to a point at least that we can use. And then there are lots of packages. So there's an NLTK package in Python. It's a natural language processing package. It allows you to do stuff like removing stop words, removing lemmatization. So it allows you to do a lot of processing the data to be able to get the core of the data. So just like the main thing, the main text, the main topics, the main words, the keywords in the data. So once these keywords are extracted, and then we can put it into like a dictionary or a corpus, or like a big chunk of data together. And then there are lots of also algorithms, already created algorithms, packages that allow you to be able to extract sentiments from the data. So what's the person feeling? What's the person saying? Is it a positive reaction to whatever question was asked, or is it a negative reaction, or is it the person? So first of all, it depends on what you really want to do. So sometimes it's just all about sentiment. Sometimes it's all about key points, the topics. So there are lots of I use one of the algorithms I use to extract topics is the LDA algorithm. It allows you to be able to actually just pull out the key topics in a big text of data, and you can actually set the number of topics that you're interested in. But first of all, one of the main things to do when you have open data, unstructured data, is the basic manual checks. So going through the data and actually being able to understand, just like random, because you can have like very large data sets that you can actually read through completely, but you want to be able to actually see that whatever you're developing as a model is telling the story in the data. So you have to do some, like checks, to be able to get to the point where all this fine tuning of the model that you create comes from the basic knowledge of what the data is about, or even what the instrument, the questions you created for the respondents is about. So you have to be able to do that domain knowledge checks first, and then it depends on your target. But most times my target, or on the job, is actually getting the key topics or the key points that have been raised in the data. And then there are just so many algorithms out there, and then you actually need to fine tune these algorithms to be able to work properly. You can't just lift them from the whatever sources. So there's a lot of work that goes into it. Yeah, but it's really interesting because it actually helps you to be able to see. It gives you it just gives you the open data, and then you have, that different opinions to work with. So yeah, it's a good form of data to get. I hope I answered that question well enough.
No, I think you did. Thank you. She says thank you as well. A question could be open to anybody, actually, all three of you. Do you need to be great at maths to perform well in any of your roles?
Yes. It usually helps, at least. I think for various reasons across the board. So like in data visualization, graphs are still math. So it kind of depends on what you consider to be math. If you're in data science, you're making literal algorithms, so you definitely have to understand math really clearly for that. Even as an analyst, you have to also be able to identify, for example, anomalies and outliers in data, understand when things make sense and don't make sense, do calculations for deltas, all kinds of things. So it's definitely a good thing to be comfortable with math, because most of the time, the biggest reason I find that I have to be really good with math is to identify when something looks wrong or something has gone wrong, versus when things are all going right. It's probably not as big of a deal, to be honest.
Liz, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I'll say probably for my role, if we're looking purely at data visualization, yeah, it's good to be comfortable with a certain amount of maths, because you're essentially trying to position stuff on a chart, right? So and if you mess up that, then you can end up with inaccurate graphs, which is always a bad thing. So there's a certain degree of things that you should be comfortable with, but at the same time, libraries like D3 will abstract away some of the more complex functions. So you can just call a function from a library and not have to think too hard about the internals. But yeah, definitely, it seems like if you are looking at a more data science role, it seems like math would be a very important aspect of that.
Binta?
Yeah, I would say yes. In a data science role, maths would be, you would need to be comfortable with it, because most of the algorithms are built on maths, and even though they're well-written packages and functions now, you wouldn't be able to know what to do with them. You would just, use them without understanding, and you wouldn't be able to do anything useful with it, because it comes to a point where you do have to understand what you're doing to be able to tune it, to be able to, be able to actually produce what you need to produce from it. You need to be able to understand it, and it's built on math. So yeah, there's no way around it with data science. With data analysis too, like Christine mentioned, you need to be at least comfortable with it, because data analysis is statistics. It's actually, you even putting a chart up, you need to be able to understand what kind of chart works best for what kind of data, and that's statistics. So yeah.
Great, thank you. Hope that answers your question. Kemi, actually, she had another question. So what would you say is your favorite part of the job as a whole, and why? So that can be aimed at all three of you. So what's the favorite part of your job and why? Binta, would you like to start?
Yeah, I would say the fact that I enjoy what I'm doing, the fact that I actually enjoy working with data. Data can be a lot, it can be a whole lot, especially when you just open the Excel sheet and you're like, wow, where do I even start from? But so you have to be able to actually enjoy working with data, or if not, you just it'll get too much. You just need to be able to know where to start with the data, know how to so I feel like the passion is necessary. And I think the fact that I have the passion for what I'm doing really helps, because I've worked in a role when I was working as a telecoms engineer. It was more all IP stuff, more network the network part of computer science, and I think I struggled a bit with trying to enjoy my job. So I think for the past 5 years, I've actually enjoyed working as a data scientist. So I think that's the core part of going to work every day. That is going to be exciting. I'm going to have challenges, but even the debugging and trying to figure out the problem is interesting. So I would say, yeah, that's for me. It's just the fact that I'm passionate about my role. That's what I enjoy the most.
How about you, Liz?
Yeah, I think to be honest, like the thing that I enjoy most about my job is that, like, yeah, all of us on the team are really super passionate. As I said before, we have like this super strong collaboration between engineering, product, and design. So like we're approaching data viz not just as a I'm not just in a position where I'm told, okay, you need to code this thing, go and do it. But like all of us are sort of involved in discussions about, as mentioned, like, what chart types are going to be useful for what types of data, the product questions of, what types of charts should we support? Because I know that one very common thing is that customers love pie charts, because that seems like the go-to chart that everybody ever wants. They're just like, okay, I'm going to make a chart. I want a pie chart. But then it turns out that pie charts aren't actually that great for visualizing data. And then you have that really awkward decision to make between, like, do you do what the customer wants, or do we do what we can to help them make the best decisions for how to visualize that data? So we have a lot of interesting questions like that come up, and like I said, just getting to collaborate on all of that and be part of that learning process as our product develops is like super exciting, and yeah, super looking forward to the future.
Christine?
Yeah, I would say for me, and this goes back to the question that was asked to Binta, I really love like turning qualitative data into quantitative data. And I think what that actually can look like is a lot of different things can mean that. Like I mentioned, I work in music and I have for some time. And one big example that people think about when they think about music is around like A&Rs, and they go to like clubs and they see, they check out new artists. And the reason why A&Rs, would go to clubs and check out new artists because they wanted to see how many people were in the room, and they wanted to see how they reacted when they were in the room. So like that's an example of a data point, and figuring out how to take that and quantify that and chart that so you can go, so you can compare and contrast and things like that is the area that I find really exciting, because you can take a lot of things that seem really abstract and make them into something that you can actually digest and move forward and make decisions with. And like that's really part I really find exciting, is using data to make decisions, but not necessarily data, not just like revenue data or sales data, but taking a lot of different data points and using that to make decisions, I think is what's really exciting for me.
Yeah, I like that. Thanks. Someone has asked, can a UX designer branch into data viz? Who wants to answer? Anyone? A UX designer? Liz? Binta?
I mean, I guess I think, like anything is possible, right? Like if you're passionate about this and like you want to take the time to learn about it, then absolutely, like if you're willing to put in the time to learn, like if you can like take a couple of courses, like do some work in your spare time, then I don't see why. Like I think it's absolutely anything that it's something that like anyone could branch into if they're passionate enough about it, essentially.
I think that leads on nicely to the next question, is there any courses or books that you guys would recommend to get into any like data science or data analytics? Are there any courses or books you would recommend?
I will take this one, at least to start. I think one thing that's really great but can be a little daunting about working in data is you can read books, but really the best way to kind of get into the space is to just do something, do a project, get on Kaggle and download a data set. And this is a shameless plug that I run a conference, but it's also a hackathon. Unfortunately, the hackathon spaces are full, but you can check out the conference, but it's a music and data conference and hackathon. Essentially, the point is people can make projects that are data related projects that they can present to, put on their portfolio, present to prospective employees in the future, things like that, essentially. So like those are the types of things that I think there's really a good space to kind of work on so that you have something to show, because really a lot of times people really care about you having something to show, and say, I understand how data works in some way.
I think
What was that? Was that Kaggle, did you say, Christine?
Kaggle, yeah.
Is that somewhere something similar to hackathon then, or?
It's kind of a self-run hackathon.
Someone asks, is it Kaggle? Please, if you could just drop Kaggle, yes. If you can just drop any information on the conference as well into the chat, and then so everybody can pick it up, that would be great. Binta, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was going to add. Well, I'm just going to drop some links as well. So, I've tried EDX. In the EDX, it's actually it's most of the courses there are free, and I've tried some of them in the past, and they've been helpful. There's also Udemy. There are lots of material. There are lots of there are just so many that you could. That's if you're just starting out and you don't even know the basics of how to, do something and put it up on Kaggle. You could just do some of these free courses. They're usually free, or they have like times where they really have low prices. So I'll just put up as many as I can on the chart.
That would be great. Thank you. Someone, I think Michelle has asked for a junior role. Is there any language, data analytical languages that you think they should master? I know you did mention Excel, but, and Python earlier, but any languages you would suggest?
I always tell people Excel 100%, and then SQL is usually the bare minimum. For me, even for the junior role, I usually won't hire anyone without those two skill sets. I think Python or R, if that's what you learn in school, can come kind of down the line. You can get trained on that, but it's really hard to kind of get up and running in terms of the work I normally do without at least a good, solid understanding of Excel and some SQL skills.
You're on mute.
Sorry, I keep doing that. I'm just saying that they're sharing some links and courses in the chat if people wanted to pick that up. I think there's a in-person course you've thought about as a General Assembly. I think I've had a look at them and they seem quite good. They do part-time and full-time courses as well. So I think that's a good one if people are like me that hate self-learning. So yeah. Another question we had was any other data visualization tools other than Tableau you would recommend?
I really love Google Data Studio. It's what again, for my conference, it's the data visualization tool we show everyone on the first day, because I think it's a really easy lift. It's free. There's not a whole lot of bells and whistles, but it's super free to kind of get an intro into data visualization. And it's really intuitive because it's like drag and drop basically, and it's already built in if you have a Google account.
Right. Liz, there's a question for you. Are there any certifications that would be advantageous for a software engineer role in data? Software engineer role in data?
I don't know, like, to be honest, like I said, for my role specifically, like I don't have any like specific like software engineering qualifications at all. So I got here entirely just by liking what I was doing and doing a lot of it. So I think especially as well, if you're going to be working for a startup, like I'm working at Graphy, that kind of like self-learning spirit is always like really, really celebrated. And I suppose if you're applying to you know, like more like standard companies, like they might have some like preferences for candidates with degrees or with specific qualifications, but definitely like startups like love anybody who has that kind of like self-driven passion to just get in there, learn things, and you know, like trial by fire essentially.
Sorry, I'm just having a look at a question. I'm not sure if I've asked this. Is there a part of the data analysis sector that is more in demand now? Where there are more junior roles available, someone has asked. Like a particular sector that.
I would say for me, I started in a startup. I worked in 2 startups, so where I work is not too far away from startup now. But then I would say, like Lee's mentioned, startups are really good for just started because they're really not so keen about your work experience even or your qualifications. They're more keen about what you can do and what you can how you can show that and the passion you have and then the willingness to learn. So I would say if you're looking for junior roles, it doesn't really have to do with the sector, I would say, but just how driven you are and how much you're able to show that in an interview. And I would suggest you go to startups. Besides starting up, I mean, besides giving you that willingness, that besides it, looking for people who are keen to learn, they give you the opportunity to actually build yourself because you're thrown in the middle. They need you to do as much. I remember I used to finish off work at 9 sometimes from a startup because it's like all the hours you can bring, please. And then it's like all your willingness to learn is really welcomed and it's really useful. So yeah, if you have that, if you want to start up in a junior role, look for startups. They're always willing to take on people who are driven. So yeah, I would say that.
Anybody else want to jump in that, or is that? No? Christine, there's a question for you. Would you say Data Studio is for beginners, then go on to Tableau? Or what are the differences?
Yeah, I think it's a really good beginner tool. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles of Tableau, but it's also not as complicated as Tableau. It's really good to kind of start off with. For example, you can plug a Google Sheet directly into it. So let's say your company has you like put out a survey or something like that. You can take the results from the survey from the form and put it directly into Data Studio and display it and allow people to filter and stuff like that. It's really, really intuitive for beginners, but it definitely doesn't have all the bells and whistles of like a Tableau or Power BI or some of the more advanced data visualization tools like Graphy. I'm sure probably has really great ones as well, but Google Data Studio is really, really basic, but really helpful to like figure it out and figure out how to like start doing early visualization and things like that.
Okay, great. And there's a question for Liz. Liz, did you develop a portfolio of some kind that helped people see your work?
So I think developing a portfolio is a great idea. It isn't the way that I got into engineering though. So in my situation, I actually reached out directly to somebody that was working. So I mentioned before I was working with the historical census data from Dundee, and I reached out to somebody who was working at Find My Past, which is a genealogy company. And he was interested in what I was doing, and I showed my my project to him, and from there on he forwarded me on to somebody who essentially offered me a contract. So yeah, I guess my advice there is I think in 99% of cases a portfolio is probably the great way forward. I probably had a fair bit of luck there, but I think there's also something to be said for actively putting yourself out there. If you've got a passion, reach out to people that you think might be interested in what you're doing, share your work. If you have Twitter, like share what you're doing on Twitter. Yeah, just like put yourself out there any way you can, and you'll hopefully find like-minded people. And even if you don't find a job, you'll hopefully learn a lot and get stuck into the community, which is great.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think those are all the questions we have. Did you guys want to share any final thoughts with anyone? Christine, Binta, would you like to share final words?
Yeah, I'll just say, first, like, I know I've said a lot of passion. I've talked a lot about passion, but I'd want to say that if you have the passion for something, I mean, for data, it would show, and then you would get noticed somehow, either in, the role you're doing. I remember when I started working on data, like I said, I was working telecoms. I started doing stuff like when I had to like show or like do some analysis, like talk about problems I was solving on my job, because that was more of troubleshooting and, trying to find solutions to existing problems. I was always trying to present my data in a way, present my work in a way that, showed some skills, some data skills, and that got noticed quickly. And, it was obvious to people I was working with that that was the area I was interested in. So it might even start from your current role if you are not, if you haven't really launched out to start off a new data career. Just, try to develop yourself and try to push yourself into that space and show it off. Like Liz mentioned, show it up on LinkedIn, show it up on any way you can, develop your portfolio, put together, do some analysis yourself and just put it out there. And you don't know who would see it, or you don't know how it will get noticed, and you don't know, so just let your passion show through what you're doing now. And, that would be like a stepping stone to greater heights. So yeah, that's what I would like to say.
Christine, did you want to say anything else?
Yeah,
You've
I guess.
shared your portfolio for us.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would like to add, I agree, like try to pursue what you love is probably the biggest piece of advice. Not always possible, but I do think that's really important to at least attempt. In addition to that, I always say play to your strengths. Sometimes it might be challenging if you're like wanting to pivot out of whatever you're doing, but at least, the easiest way to get your foot into the door for what you're trying to do is to kind of do something tangentially related to what you were doing before, and then continue to progress. It might be a bit slower, but it's probably going to be a lot less stressful for you overall if you're frustrated or struggling applying to roles that you actually have no experience in. So figuring out how to bridge that gap and find the middle ground to move over, I think is really helpful to save your own mental health, to be honest.
Wait, Liz, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, and like apart from like what I previously said about putting yourself out there, like always advocating for yourself is super important, as well, especially if you do end up in a situation where you work for a startup, or you're applying for a startup, or even if you're just sort of like hustling really hard to get your skills to the point where you feel comfortable like applying for roles. Don't forget to take care of yourself and make sure you don't burn out, essentially. Because even if you have a lot of passion, and I've fallen into this trap before, right? Because I've been so passionate about what I'm doing that I'll be, like I will be like working till 9 o'clock or something, because I'm like, I'm building a cool new thing. But do too much of that and your mental health is just going to suffer in the long run. So yeah, make sure you take care of yourselves as well. And always I find that if I take a little bit of a break and come back, I will approach the problem with a much clearer head and get to much better solutions.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you all. Amy, did you want to say anything before we round up?
Yeah, just thanks again so much to everyone for coming along and for having us here. I think Liz did an amazing job representing Graphy, but yeah, again, if anyone wants to reach out to hear a bit more about us, we're talking a lot about obviously a bunch of data viz tools and Tableau and things like that. And I think Graphy, we're the next generation data viz platform. So would really love to have a chat to people about, what our intentions are and how we're going to give you all data superpowers. So yeah, check out our careers page too if you're interested in any of our roles. But yeah, that's all from me. Thank you. Thanks for hosting, Cheryl.
Thank you so much. I just want to say again, thank you so much to Liz, Christine, and Binta for today. And just thank you for taking the time this evening to come and talk to us. I really hope everybody has enjoyed the session and you've learned something and you're inspired to get into some data roles, really. Yes, thank you. You might receive a feedback form after the session or later on, maybe tomorrow. But if you do want to just find out a bit more information about Coding Black Females and our partnership with Graphy and all other partners, our socials are up at the moment. So yeah, I think that's it. Thank you guys. I'm seeing lots of thank yous. Thank you definitely to Binta, Christine, and Liz. The recording will be available. I think it will be up on our YouTube channel. So we'll look out for that as well. So yeah, thank you very much, guys. Hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. And thank you so much for coming to our session. And hopefully see you at another one soon.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.